Well, hello there and welcome back to LV46 for another juicy Alien update. I've been waiting for a little more information, even some set photos, or just something for a while now. Mostly I have to say in regards to the Alien TV series, as that particular project was supposed to be coming sooner, but we still have had no release date on that as of yet, sadly. But Alien Romulus, if you didn't know, is a feature film that has been directed by Fede Alvarez for Disney, and is set to be released on August of 2024 on Hulu, as well as having a theatrical run. I explained in previous videos what we know so far about the synopsis, so I won't go into detail too much here, but essentially it's been described as more of an isolated story, away from events of the other films. It takes place in a remote world where a small group of young people, and I know that part might cause a lot of you to roll your eyes, but the crew stationed there are possibly working in this remote location for research purposes rather than colonisation attempts. Specifically, what they are working on and how they come into contact with non-humans, shall we say, remains a bit of a mystery. But of course they do ultimately find themselves up against the infamous xenomorph, or xenomorphs perhaps, plural, yet again for hopefully what will be a well-written, well-acted and intensely scary experience, hopefully. Now, the dramatic news in today's video that I wanted to speak about is that the director Fede Alvarez, who by the way is responsible for, well, I say responsible, that almost makes him sound guilty, doesn't it? But Fede wrote as well as directed the Don't Breathe movies. And if you like remakes, then The Evil Dead and The Girl in the Spider's Web was his also. So Fede is actually at the point with Alien Romulus that he now has a director's cut of the film. I imagine it has to be fairly crude at this point, seeing as how we are just shy of a year away from release, and the current version would be missing all that love and care treatment that happens in the editing room. However, Ridley Scott, the master himself, has seen it in a private viewing and has given his feedback to Fede. So I'll just throw up on the screen what Fede Alvarez said about it in a recent Q&A with Guillermo del Toro. I'll put the link to the video in the description below for you guys. Not going to read it word for word, but he basically said he was nervous about showing Ridley the film, understandably, but he wanted Ridley to be the first to see it and also to be there to get a face-to-face feedback. He goes on to say that people had warned him how tough Ridley can be, especially when it comes to projects that tie in with his own movies. I mean, you can say that again, right? He mentions the Blade Runner sequel and how he found critique in that film, which I can kind of understand, even if the majority of the film was bloody fantastic. We all have our own visions of what something should be, I guess. But I suppose one thing that has always bugged me, if you pardon the pun, is how I've never heard Ridley give proper credit to James Cameron for his efforts in Aliens. For me, if I were to compare Ridley's Prometheus and Covenant to Cameron's Aliens, there is no comparison. I would always pick Aliens as the superior film. I like to think this is merely because Ridley didn't approve of the direction Aliens took rather than any critique of the film's quality, however. So I think there is being tough, and then there is also, well, I never had anything to do with the project, so fuck 'em. But strangely, even though Fede says here that he feared the worst comments, like, you destroyed my legacy, etc., Ridley came out of the viewing and says, what can I say, it's fucking great. Alright, so we now officially have our first movie review on Alien Romulus, and apparently it's great. Effing great. Or is it though? Remember that Ridley Scott is a producer on the film, and honestly there aren't many occasions when producers have tried to advertise any problems there might be with their movies, is there? I distinctly remember when James Cameron specifically told us how amazing the last Terminator film was going to be, you know? The movie he also worked on as a producer. How did that one turn out? So what I'm trying to express is that we should probably take this news with a pinch of salt and not build up too much hopes on it right now. Sadly, I doubt we will ever find out what feedback Ridley gave to Fede during the hour's discussion, as that's the part I'm particularly interested in, not so much the "it's great" soundbite. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, I really want nothing more than for this film to be amazing, I truly do. Okay, so hear me out. I do feel like any doubt cast over this movie, any concerns for it not being of the quality that us fans of the Alien universe deserve, is comprised of just a small number of factors. We know that they can deliver on the visuals and sound effects, right? I mean, come on, how good did Alien Covenant look? The lighting and tone of the film was fantastic. The attack on the crew from the smaller pale aliens was genuinely horrifying to watch. We also know that the cast for Romulus has potential at the very least. From what I've seen of the actors in other projects, they can all act well enough. So what's the only ingredient that does warrant our concern? In my opinion, it's always the script. I think what ultimately lets down many of these big budget modern films that end up flopping is the integrity of the screenplay and how well it translates to filming. Maybe there is sometimes laziness in the writing when perhaps they rely too heavily on CG and sort of end up thinking, that'll work, we'll just make it look pretty enough later. But why were the first two films so damn enjoyable to watch? Well, there certainly wasn't a focus on CG back in those days, so if you remove that distraction and replace it with the talents of craftsmanship and something called being inventive and creative, then all that's left to map out is a thought-provoking and engrossing story with characters, that feel real and have compelling dialogues. For some reason, I hate to say it and I really hope I'm proven wrong, I just get this strong feeling that Romulus will end up falling into the same repetition that other modern films sometimes do. Will it trick us with the veneer of a sci-fi horror classic, but in reality will it just be an empty husk of a bland B horror flick with A+ visuals? As always though, until we have a trailer to busy our thoughts, we won't know how they've set the tone and what kind of story they are trying to tell. But despite my negativity, I do remain firmly on the 50-50 fence, as many new films do continue to blow my mind and there is always the hope and possibility that another Alien movie could actually be good. Fede Alvarez did a great job with both the Don't Breathe movies, so he understands to an acceptable level the importance of suspense. I don't think he's ever made a film that I could say, yeah, I loved it, but then maybe we'll get to say that with Romulus, who knows. So yeah, on a positive note, I do think with regards to Ridley's comment about the film being effing great, you can pick holes in it all day long, but if we simply take it for what it is, then we have a very positive comment from one of the best visionary filmmakers in the world, so how's that for an incentive? I did say earlier that Romulus was most likely going to be a standalone film and that we were told in earlier reports how the story was removed from any events already canon and the other movies entirely. I do find that hard to believe, however. I have a sneaky suspicion that we are on the verge of a massive re-emergence within the Alien universe, and if they pull it off, then we might possibly get a load more films as well as future TV adaptations. I don't see how Romulus will tie in with the upcoming Alien TV series because they are many years apart. The series will take place at the time of Ripley's birth, and the film is set between the events of Alien and Aliens. But it does feel like they are setting up some groundwork rather than Romulus merely being a one-off story that just so happens to include xenomorphs at the very least. I mean, it's not like these creatures are everywhere in the galaxy, right? The only times we've encountered them on the big screen is via the engineers or their derelict ships. So I find the notion that Romulus will not tie in with previous or future films or series a bit of a stretch. So until we have more info on the plot and a trailer to feast on, I have a million questions that are desperate for some answers. The biggest of which would be how they come into contact with the alien and at what point in its life cycle as well. Will it be the chicken or the egg, so to speak? So I'm very much intrigued by this upcoming Alien film from a different director and a separate story from what we're used to. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments section about Ridley's positive feedback and whether you took it as good news or something to be ignored for now. So thank you very much for watching, and in the meantime, stay entertained.